Okay, it sounds like we should be all good. All right. Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist has been singing almost his entire life as music quickly became like second nature to him. Now located in the City of Angels, he's got the awards to prove that he's here to stay in the pop music world. Welcome, Sammy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, why don't you kind of start off by telling me a little bit about where your journey with music kind of all began?
Well, I had really supportive parents growing up, and they definitely saw that music was something that really helped me through some of my social anxieties. And so they set me up in voice lessons. My mom wanted to make me a part of this singing group called the Dan Kane Singers. And I grew up in like the rural Connecticut, Massachusetts area. And so since I was 8, I was performing in this group, and I became a soloist, and it fed my desire to perform. And I think songwriting was always something that I was really fascinated in. And as cliche as it may be, I was a huge Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys fanatic. I thought pop music was life itself, and I think it was a bit of a funny contradiction because I was singing, you know, traditional jazz standards for thousands of people locally, at these shows and county fair type environments, and but in private I was screaming Christina Aguilera. And my dad was playing a lot of jazz music. He introduced me to Etta James, so I was fascinated in the the kind of mixture of pop and soul, and um, that informed a lot of my songwriting. So when the songwriting took off, I was about 12, and I was taking piano from a teacher who was really supportive of my desire to write songs, less than my desire to learn music theory. So he was teaching me inversions. He was teaching me how to kind of a format for writing music, and giving me that outlet, because I was kind of writing poems and putting melodies to them, but I had nothing to accompany them with, because I wasn't really interested in learning piano young as a young kid. But once I turned 12 or 13, I knew that I needed it in order to continue writing songs. And shortly after I started recording some music, I got the attention of a Nashville producer through a mutual friend who I actually met in the Dankin Singers. And I started traveling to Nashville almost every school vacation I had in high school to record an album with amazing musicians. I still can't believe that um, that was an opportunity I had at that time. I don't take that for granted. I will say that I wish I had maybe more of a songwriting mentor to help me be in touch with my emotions more, because I wasn't really comfortable expressing myself in front of these old people. And I think I was cloaking a lot of my feelings in maybe too much metaphor and not enough um, authenticity. And so as I kind of became more comfortable with myself, um, which took a while as like a gay person from a rural town. So I went to Nashville for college, and I kind of lost touch with that producer. And I started learning to produce myself. And as I learned kind of the DAWs like Logic and Pro Tools, I was able to kind of express myself a little deeper because I had the time alone with myself to truly feel my feelings. And I did a lot of workshops at the Bluebird Cafe, which is a pretty iconic, I guess you could say, place for songwriters. It's like a hole in the wall in Nashville, and I was able to perform my songs for publishers and music industry professionals who kind of ripped them apart and told me, why they were not suitable or commercially viable, at least in the context of country music, which I wasn't necessarily interested in. But I think the craft of country music helped me realize um, a format or a um, kind of a rubric that I could know so that I would know how to break the rules in the right way. Um, and I think knowing how to write a country song um, can help you write any song because it's all about making every line pay off so that the hook um, feels very satisfying. And that storytelling, I think, is the hardest part of songwriting for me. And I really craved that turn of a phrase that gave people that feeling of, oh, I feel understood now, or this is me. I feel this too, and I connect with this person. So I kind of dove into that world, and I kept doing these workshops. School was not as important to me, though I was kind of a perfectionist and wanted to excel at that too. Um, I really just wanted to immerse myself in Music Row, and when I got the opportunity to intern in LA, I worked for Prescription Songs and AAM, which was Dr. Luke's management and record label. And shortly after that, I worked for Disney Music Group as an intern in their marketing division. I didn't want to go back for my senior year, but I had to. And after I graduated, I moved back to LA and signed a publishing deal 2 years after that. And I've currently been writing for different projects and mostly writing for myself. I think I've evolved to a point where I I want to write um, mostly for myself and put out my own material as a solo artist.
So would you say that when you ended up back in LA, that was kind of the point where you were like, being an artist is what I'm committing myself to, or was that something that you kind of wrestled with like earlier on in the timeline?
When I first signed the publishing deal, I think my people pleasing tendencies were really heightened. I wanted to write a smash hit for, whoever wanted it, whatever was on the pitch list. I was working really, really hard and not necessarily smart because I think some of the better songs I've written always come from um, being in touch with yourself. And if an artist wants to cut that, it's because it's personal to you and therefore personal to them. And I was looking too outside of myself. So there were some cuts that I got out of that hustle, but um, they're not as gratifying as the ones that maybe came from a deeper place.
Um, so what do you think then inspires a lot of your writing? Like, is there a common theme or a common like topic, if you will, that you find comes up in a lot of the stuff you write? And
Mhm.
ultimately, does that change from focusing on writing for you versus for somebody else?
As I get older, I really want to get deeper into whatever my current truth is. So I think I avoided that early on in life as much as I really thought I was extracting something um, true. I don't think it was the whole truth. And I think the I don't want to like avoid the ugly parts and the parts that make me feel too vulnerable and uncomfortable. I don't know if it's like I'm too therapized right now. Like I go to therapy, and I think that's um, something that is healing for me is being able to face kind of those ugly things you feel, whether it's like self-hatred or judgment of others, and not being like and not judging them so hard, but just saying what it is. And sometimes that just ends in like um, a song about like I have a song called Dead Inside, which is actually a very positive song about a relationship I'm currently in with my boyfriend. And it's about how he defied my expectations about myself because I thought that I was washed up, burnt out. But his support and love actually kind of revitalized my sense of self and my self-worth. And I wanted to hopefully do that for him too. And so I guess the ironic phrase in it is, I thought I was dead inside. Um, but that's obviously not the case. So yeah.
So it really just kind of depends on where life's at the moment, and that's just kind of where the writing goes from then.
Yeah. Also, like another example, I was working for about 4 years at Capitol Records. I was working as the sole metadata operations person there, and I felt very um, I don't know how to say it without sounding dramatic, but I didn't feel very respected, and I felt overworked, and I started writing about that. And I have another song called Time Bomb that's basically shitting on everyone that I worked with. And out I think that was helpful to me because I my feelings were valid, but I also recognized that beyond that anger is like healing, and you don't have to hold on to that. So I think that's one of my favorite songs I've written that I've put out, called Time Bomb, because I think, in my opinion, kind of perfectly uh, captures what a toxic work environment can do to your spirit.
Does so you write, I mean, like you said, you write from a place of whatever is going on. Does that how do you approach writing songs for other people then? Like, is it also coming from a place of personal experience? Is it not? Is it like, I, I mean, it also kind of depends if it's in a collaborative environment or it's just you
Mhm.
kind of writing these songs. So, what does that kind of process look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've struggled with that a little bit, but I think what works best for me is to get in touch with who that artist is, get to know them as best as I can. If it's pitching to them without actually being in the room writing with them, that's what makes it a little hard. And I think it is a shot in the dark, and you have to just trust your instincts and know that human emotions are universal. Um, and I try not to be. I think I've written with a lot of people who are very gender specific, and I don't really prescribe to that ideology. I don't like when people say like, oh, a girl wouldn't say that or a guy wouldn't say that. I was like, I think we all have feelings and should be able to express them. So um, that's where it gets a little tricky, because it kind of depends on like if labels are involved and they want something very specific for their artist. That's what's so hard. I've had circumstances where I've written on a track. It was like a Chainsmokers track, and it got passed around for 2 years. And I ended up getting royalties for a song by BTS, the K-pop group, because I had written like 2 or 3 years before on that track, and it was registered with the same title, and it just kind of happened. And my publisher to this day is still um, trying, hopefully, to solidify my writer credit on it, um, but it's not. I don't have an official credit on it, but I'm making royalties from it. So that's where things get really complicated. And I try not to overthink or make it like sometimes I'm like, was I a part of it? Was I not? I think um, at this point I need to like take the win because I have been struggling so much. And if I'm making a little money from something that I did put effort into, and uh, the hook is basically the same as the hook that I had written with my friend from Nashville, I think it's necessary to just let it be and not necessarily try and fight for this credit that I'd probably get like 2% of it, um, but I am making certain streaming royalties, not all of them. So um, yeah, and there's other situations where I've been in a room with like 10 people wanting to write this uh, kind of Spanish and English type of song, and they were kind of using me as like a sounding board for melodies. Um, and I don't necessarily work that way, but I had to lean into that and you know say, okay, you want these lyrics and you want it to be kind of um, structured a certain way. Let's go for that. So that was one of my first cuts with this I believe Albanian artist named Clady, and it did really well on YouTube. But I haven't been able to collect the royalties from YouTube, just the streaming royalties, and the YouTube royalties would be a lot better. So um, it's hard for me to think in terms of making of optimizing how much I'm making off of these songs, because until I get like a really big cut, it's kind of hard to like advocate for myself without a lot of representation. So that's been a little difficult, but I think it's character building, if I'm looking on the bright side.
It's all you really can do. And for anybody who may be listening that doesn't understand the music world, royalties are a pain in the butt.
Hmm.
There's like 10 different versions, and it depends on where you're at, what it means. And that's why there's a lot of musicians not getting the money they should be. So
Yeah,
just,
certainly.
um, so kind of jumping back to the stuff that you release as an artist, how would you describe the music that you make for somebody that's not heard it?
Sorry, say that again.
How would you describe the music that you put out for somebody who's never heard it?
Mm, that's the hardest question, I think. I'm never good at condensing what it is that my sound is. I I want to say it's pop, but that's too general, right? And then singer songwriter is also too general. Um, but I would say that there's a lot of it's pop with a lot of uh, R&B and alt rock influence, with a very uh, clear attention to um, storytelling, in almost in the style of like Nashville songcraft. I want, um, but I also want it to be very pop. And right now, my top songs on Spotify are a lot of EDM cuts I've gotten, and that upsets me a little bit because it doesn't represent what I do. I do like some of the songs and how they're crafted, but I think they don't very clearly represent who I am. Like my song SMH um, is about a lot of my trauma, I guess, and dealing with some of my toxic feelings, kind of like what I was talking about in the beginning. And that's one of my more successful songs that I've released on my own. And hopefully it will, get back to the top of my page at some point. Gonna, try and promote it more on TikTok and all that good stuff. But yeah, I've done a horrible job at capturing what my what my sound is. But let me hmm, I guess it would be like like vulnerable, angsty pop, if that, yeah.
I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
So, kind of going off of that, then, is there a particular song that you've written and put out that you think best embodies kind of who you are as an artist? Like, basically, if you were trying to sell somebody on listening to you as an artist, you have one song to kind of show them to get them to be a fan of yours. Do you know what that song might be?
Hmm. I think it would either be SMH or Time Bomb. That's what I would like it to be. But I have realized over the years that my favorite song of mine does not necessarily mean it's everyone else's favorite. So I want to be conscious of that moving forward. I think like SMH was almost so vulnerable that I resisted being super proud of it or cheering about it. But it was kind of what resonated with a lot of people on social media, what kind of got me new followers and new listeners on Spotify or Apple or whatever. So um, that was a really organic feeling of capturing people's attention, and I have to give that um, give it credit. I think a time bomb, about working in a toxic work environment, not necessarily the immediate success or attention that I wanted. It's a little more nuanced. You don't necessarily have the context of knowing what the song really is about, even though I talk about the culture and how I'm uh, basically like some of the lyrics are like, "You're high on power, I tolerate it, put in the hours, um, put in the hours to fuck." I forgot the lyrics. Sorry. Anyways, the chorus is, "I'm a ticking time bomb. Don't keep doing me wrong. You lean on me, but that don't mean I'm loyal." So it's kind of a fuck you song, and I like kind of leaning into my anger in music. So
That's where the angsty vibe comes from.
yeah.
Um, what ultimately like motivates you to continue to be writing and putting out new music like as an artist?
Sometimes it doesn't feel like a choice. I think it's been such a part of me that I don't think I can even separate from. Though there are times when the industry can make me feel like I should go find literally any other thing to do with my life just because it's so hard. And um but I've read that book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and that's given me a lot of perspective and really helped me embrace the fact that I don't deserve any external success, but I deserve the joy that music gives me. And that's why I continue to do it. And I still have very big aspirations for my music. Um, but I think I have to put more attention on the way music makes me feel, what it does for my mental health and my spirit. And hopefully the music can do that for some people or a lot of people. And I'm trying to understand that it's not always up to me. It's only my job to keep creating and being genuine.
So, would you say that part of what motivates you is ultimately the impact that you want to have?
Yeah, um, I guess impact, like as far as like commercial impact, I think that's probably not as helpful to me because it stifles the creativity a little bit. It makes it harder to get in touch with what I really feel, what I really want to say. So the the commercial success aspiration part of it can be a distraction because I got so invested in it that I forgot how much I loved music. So that's been kind of a thing that I've been really working with right now to make sure that I um, stay on a path of integrity with my music, I suppose, and not try to doom scroll through Instagram or TikTok and just watch um, all of these people I want to uh, be associated with or be as successful as. Um, if I get too invested in that, I lose the inspiration to create. And I feel like that might be the consensus of a lot of creatives, especially creatives who feel like they need to be present on social media at all times. Um, I think there's almost a little too much self-awareness right now with like how we're perceived. And I think that's kind of like the disease of it all. Like I I don't want to care so much about how I look or how I'm perceived that I just like don't even know what to do, like feel paralyzed by it.
Um, so yeah, I mean, that's the industry is a whole mess of a place anymore.
Mm.
Um, but more so on the like impact thing, more so on the side of like you talked about like kind of how other people would like perceive like your music and like that kind of like the stuff that you're writing, obviously like you're not the only one living that kind of experience, you know? So like
Mhm.
is that part of then kind of what motivates you more the impact of like having that sort of personal connection kind of thing rather than oh I want this song to perform to this level and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Um, I think that like grassroots level um, promotion, for lack of a better word, is better for me right now because um, I think having my song get on a bunch of playlists is not necessarily um, attracting the right people. My music is not for everyone, and I think that's important for me to understand. The people it's for are the ones who message me saying, oh my God, this is me. This is my life, or I'm gonna show this to all my friends. Um, I don't know. I didn't try to um, attract those types of people. I feel like I've always looked for validation from people within the industry. And I forgot that there's like literally people in Minnesota who have found my song and are like, oh my God, you understand me as like a gay guy who's from a small town and who's, romanticized their life in a way that um, has uh, been a bit detrimental, but also, uh, you know, we're, I don't know if I'm making sense right now, but um, like, I guess to give an example is in shaking my head, I just really start off by saying like, I feel anxious, inadequate, like I ain't shit, but I'm last to quit. Not famous, so not as legit as the brainless singing about bad bitches. So I'm leaning into that feeling of being misunderstood and wanting to, be the successful uh, pop star. And it's funny because I think so many uh, people like me have romanticized like Hollywood, and I think that's like a lot of what SMH is about. And um, feeling like you had to like kind of move away from your town and prove people wrong, like that is like almost the cliche of it all. And I kind of wanted to take the piss out of it by writing this song that's just confronting every little tiny insecurity about being a musician, and also being somebody who doesn't fit the mold of the industry, at least in the past. You know, so yeah.
No, I mean, the like some other things, the music industry is constantly changing, but that mold is something that seems to still kind of remain. I think we're breaking away from it a little bit with the shift into kind of the independent world that's kind of slowly
Yeah.
growing. It's there. It's going to happen. I'm waiting for the day that we're making up just as much of a market share as the label people, but might be a ways down the road.
Yeah.
I'll take it a little bit more in a lighter hearted direction and ask, um, if you could open for any artist, who would it be?
Hmm. Oh my goodness.
So many options.
Okay, the first things coming to mind are SZA,
Okay.
Lady Gaga.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's this independent artist named Carol Addis. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I have
Um,
not.
I don't even know if she's independent, but a friend of mine introduced me to one of her songs, and I'm obsessed with her. I would absolutely love to open for her. Who else? Um, John Bellion. Uh,
I am the biggest John Bellion fan. He's the reason I started writing music.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Um, God. Um, like I don't even know if the people I want to open for like even make sense as far as like genre compatibility, but like
Hmm.
I guess it's my fantasy.
Doesn't always have to, I mean,
Yeah,
you could
totally.
see all different kinds of combinations. It's just because you never know. Like somebody who's a
Yeah,
Lady Gaga fan might also be like a John Bellion fan, even though,
yeah,
like, yes, they're both pop. They're very different styles anymore. So you could
yeah.
find somebody meets in the middle and you're all
Mhm.
set.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, I'd even like to open for Eminem. Like one of my biggest dreams is to have a hook on an Eminem song. Um, like just like the whole Skylar Grey era where she was writing like these massive like melodic hooks on his songs. That was like just gold to me. Like I loved the way you lie, I need a doctor, all of that stuff. Because she was such a like singer songwriter, but then you know Eminem fucked with her, and like the merging of those two very different genres, it is really appealing to me. And I think that's also kind of what inspires like the genre that I do, like with SMH, even Time Bomb, very much um, that uh, very honest, to almost to a fault, where it makes people a little uncomfortable. Like I'm really trying to um, emulate that energy a little bit more these days.
You opening for Eminem would be a sight to see. I
Yeah,
feel like that'd be a very unique combination.
it would certainly, yeah. Um, yeah, there's certain songs I've written too where I'm like, how can I get my publisher to get this to Eminem? So like, um, yeah.
um, I'm sure you know being in LA, but the world of independent artists is probably bigger than it's ever been. Very saturated kind of world that we live in now, doing it ourselves and all that. What is it that you think kind of makes you set apart from all of your peers essentially? Like what is something that kind of makes you stand out from the rest?
Well, I think the unique experience of being a really pop centric artist who studied songwriting in school at Nashville and then did like really immerse myself in these workshops. So I weirdly have like this country background. Like some of my songs have like a like if they had different instrumentation on it, they could be a country song. Not all of them, definitely not all of them. I would say like one comes to mind, same page, which is out now. It I'm promoting myself. Um, it I wrote it about my friend, um, my only friend from high school, really. I come back to my hometown. I'm currently in my hometown now for a couple weddings. I've never been invited to more weddings in my life. Um, but the song is about coming back home for like Thanksgiving, and you know how it's almost kind of like a high school reunion, a bit where you run into people you know. But it's specifically about being with this one friend of mine and embracing that we don't feel great about life right now, but we find solace in the fact that we are on the same page together. Um, and romanticizing, you know, the life we once had in this small town with all these big dreams and um, you know, laughing at the days we couldn't wait to pack up all our bags and drive away. But since then, I've gone a little insane. It's nice to be with you on the same page. With like imagery throughout the verses about like, you know, smoking a cigarette on the cul-de-sac and like developing all these new bad habits as we, you know, are forged into adulthood um, and are just really messy and rough around the edges. And but also just, you know, at the end of the day, are really happy to have that friendship.
So, um, that's the one that you think kind of has that sort of like country kind of influence. Is there any other of your songs that you think have kind of a not obscure, but like different kind of piece of influence from somewhere else that
Mm,
is like a little different than like some of your stuff? Like obviously it's all kind of grounded in this
mhm.
center central kind of sound that is you, but like this one has that country sound. Is there anything else that kind of has that outside element to it?
I'm thinking, I'm actually like looking at my Spotify right now. I don't have like enough music. Like I really want to put out more music that represents who I am in this moment. I'm sure you can relate. Like your last song that you released is not necessarily what represents who you are as an artist uh, now versus yesterday. Like I um
I'm still backlogging a little bit.
I hear that. Yeah. Um, but yeah, let me think. Like my song User with it's a duet with a friend of mine, Megan Fahey, that I think is inspired by like the Civil Wars. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're Nashville-based Americana
hmm
band.
I thought
Um,
you meant the actual like Civil War for a
oh,
second, and then I was like, interesting.
uh,
No,
yeah,
no,
that
the
might
band
be
I'm
an
familiar.
interesting turn of events in this podcast. No, yeah, it's called the Civil Wars because I think they actually had a tumultuous relationship and they broke up this duo because I think they were cheating with their spouses on each other. And anyways, they have a song called Poison and Wine, and their harmonies were very special, and I wanted to kind of capture that melodic influence a little bit. Um, I guess like a song that I did with a DJ friend of mine, named LMNOP. It's called "Take It Away," and that has a lot of R&B influence. Um, Probably even a little Bon Iver influence, with like the verses being like kind of all airy falsetto. Um, Lyrically, I'm trying to think of like songs like Cheap Lullaby definitely have a little bit of an R&B like Kehlani influence. Um, Even John Bellion, like certain melodies, I feel like, oh, I hope that maybe John Bellion would like this, and I can only hope. But you know, like there's and certain production value of it that I think that like certain melodic hooks throughout it, and instrumentation throughout it, is definitely inspired by him. Because yeah, who isn't inspired by him? Like I think his production and songs from even like almost like 8 years ago is still so fresh to me. So um, yeah,
Sounds like you got a little bit of everything going on.
yeah,
Try to keep it new and different.
yeah, I think like at the end of the day, if you like go through like the songs that I've self-released, like there's more cohesiveness than I've probably let on, but I think in the back of my mind, I like know all of the inspirations behind it, but the ending product isn't necessarily
Hmm.
uh, indicative of that.
I mean, that makes sense. It's you're the only one who really gets to see the journey from start to finish if you're the one who's doing it all yourself, you know? So,
Yeah,
and it doesn't necessarily need to be an influence to the consumer eye. It really can just
yeah,
be from a place of because somebody somewhere will put two and two together, you know?
yeah,
The casual listener might not, but somebody will be like, I
mm,
hear a little bit of this in there, especially if they're a fan of that person. And then anybody they know who's a fan of that person sending you their way. So
yeah. That's a good
slowly but
point.
surely, you're just gonna be everywhere.
Yeah, totally. That's a good point. Yeah, there's also a song called "Pretty Devil" that I did specifically to get synced in a TV show. Like,
Hmm.
I wrote it with um, a producer friend of mine, Tay Dex, and a girl who I duetted. I don't know if that's a word. I did a duet with a girl on it, named Belle Saint, and she's really successful in kind of that sync world. She has like a lot of sync placements in shows and commercials, and my publisher set me up with her. And so her influence and the producer's influence really informed a lot of like how I even approached singing it, and uh, the style of it. It was a lot more moody and soulful, um, and lyrically a little more um, ambiguity, because that's what they ask for with sync music. But it lent to like a very interesting collaboration. So yeah, I think my collaborators, I look to as inspiration as much as I do, you know, John Bellion or Eminem or
All those guys.
Britney Spears, whoever it may be.
So I think that kind of leaves us with our last question, which is the title of the podcast. Why music? Like of all things that because there's thousands and thousands of things that us as human beings could be doing. Why music for what you're pursuing?
Mm, it's I'm trying to form my thoughts. And as I say that, I'm thinking, as an introvert, I have a lot of trouble expressing myself. And I think that's probably the primary reason for writing music because I can take all of the time I need to express my truth and to feel connected to the world. I don't think I'd be a good public speaker. I don't think I would be great in, as like a leader in, a corporation, but as somebody who can express themselves um, really well in that art form, I think that's the reason I do it, and that's where I can make the biggest impact, not just on people around me, but for myself.
I mean, ultimately, it does come down to like your why is going to be the message that you want to deliver, the impact that you want to have, and
Mhm.
that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's what lights a fire under our ass, and it's why we do it every day, you know?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that concludes this week's episode of the Why Music podcast. We will be back with another new artist next week. Thanks for listening.